Fans of Jujutsu Kaisen have been theorizing for years about what Sukuna's true technique is. The King of Curses himself wanted it to remain mysterious, but also gets excited when anyone can figure it out. But now that we're approaching the end, we finally have most of the details about it. And sadly, it's not a cooking technique like some fans thought, although it kind of is. Remember that thought to be mistranslation calling it Malevolent Kitchen? Well, without further ado, let's dive right into Sukuna and his curse technique. Seeing as Sukuna was human and stayed active thanks to Kenjaku's help with dividing him into 20 pieces, it's no surprise that his curse technique is extremely powerful. I mean, come on, have you seen how many strong Jujutsu users are struggling against him right now? Still, if it wasn't for Yuji's caring personality and purposeful creation as his vessel, Sukuna might have kept sleeping another 1,000 years. That said, the story fed us bits and pieces of his technique as it went on, culminating in this final arc. First things first, Cleave and Dismantle are what we see him use the most, because it's Sukuna's offensive and least demanding part of his innate technique. Not that much of anything is taxing when it comes to his massive storage of cursed energy. Cleave is a semi-automated skill that adapts to the target's amount of cursed energy, cutting them down in one attack. Considering the breakneck speed at which Sukuna fights, this probably takes a second or less to calculate. It does, however, require him to actually touch the intended recipient for it to work. There has to be some limitation, right? It can also be modified to resemble a spider web, breaking apart whatever's marked by the pattern. Visually, it's pretty similar to Endeavor's Hell Spider, but without the fire. Dismantle, on the other hand, is a long-range slicing attack that can take down most opponents, curse and human alike. But since it's more of a default technique, it doesn't have as much power as something that can be calibrated like Cleave. It's the attack we see Sukuna use when he's flicking his fingers most of the time. But it can also be activated without any gesture to take his enemy by surprise, like he did against Kusakabe, who also has semi-automated defensive and offensive abilities. Before we knew these specifics, many readers thought the difference between them was the one that worked on animate and the other on inanimate objects. Gege likes to keep us on our toes though. That aside, on many occasions, Sukuna's been depicted sitting on top of a pile of skulls, like some ruler of the underworld. One of the first times we see this is after Yuji dies and makes a binding vow with him so that he can come back to life. But there's always been hints of this shrine, almost seeming like a throne when curses have the misfortune of making him mad. Of course, there was a glimpse of Malevolent Shrine, Sukuna's domain expansion, while he fought the Finger Bearer, for a brief second, but it became clearer as Sukuna gained fingers and got closer to having his true body. Against Maharaga, it was just a rapid succession of slashes that the eye couldn't catch. The only thing visible was the destruction left afterwards, but we were later blessed with multiple domain expansions when he fought Gojo and other strong sorcerers. So what is Malevolent Shrine? Just like Dismantle, and because it's a domain, Sukuna doesn't have to touch the enemy to trigger it, but his area of effect works a bit differently. For Malevolent Shrine, there's no defined barrier keeping someone trapped within it. Because of that handicap that he gives himself, it grants him a binding vow to change the parameters of the domain. To be more precise, Sukuna can make it reach a radius of up to 200 meters if he wants. And seeing as domains tend to just be a more powerful representation of the related curse technique, Sukuna can adjust Cleave and Dismantle within that radius to follow certain rules. But that's not all. Since it's just a wide open space, any enemy that would normally attack it to break out of the domain is out of luck. They would need to put Sukuna himself out of commission to stop the domain's effects. This also makes it very good against other domains, seeing as Sukuna can just expand his reach and attack their barrier from the outside. This is, again, because most, if not all, domains are weak against outside attacks, seeing as the goal is to keep them trapped inside. But there's also the chance that someone very unlucky walks into his open domain not having noticed the danger. I sometimes wonder if that's what actually happened to Haruta rather than Sukuna using Dismantle. And if that's not enough, Sukuna can use a Binding Vow to add more limitations onto Malevolent Shrine, in case he needs to take down a challenging enemy. This includes removing his guaranteed hits, making its range of attack much smaller so that he can boost the power of the slashing strikes. One more thing of importance is the hand signs or chants involved. Usually the longer it takes to perform them, the stronger the result becomes. If it's too long, some characters are able to skip some steps to activate their domain faster. Malevolent Shrine activates through the Enma palm sign, which unsurprisingly is a reference to the Buddhist god of death. Once again, Sukuna proves he's the ruler of darkness. But when he couldn't open his domain normally, he had to modify his hand signs because of the damage that Gojo's Unlimited Void had done to him, just so that he can ensure that it would be launched again. There were also the binding vows and conditions he set so that it would include the sure hit attacks like normal, but this kind of feat is only possible from someone who lived during the golden age of Jujutsu, the Heian era. So many users back then were astoundingly strong, so it was necessary to be insanely flexible. In other words, someone else with Sukuna's technique or domain probably couldn't perform or modify it as efficiently. Still, all those limitations only gave him access to 99 seconds worth of time. But going forward, because of Sukuna's unexpected fire usage against Jogo and Shibuya, we were left wondering if he had a technique that let him copy his opponent's skills. You know, like a different version of Yuta's abilities. But hearing Sukuna announce the word Fuga and create a bow and arrow from flames, it started to look less likely. Sure, the element was the same, but it was just a coincidence in the end. This is actually his divine flame, which he can call out from thin air to launch far-reaching attacks using fire. If not for Urarame, we wouldn't even know the name of this technique since Sukuna refuses to explain everything. It's not him being cocky, by the way. Oh, okay, maybe a little. It's actually due to the binding vow that explaining a curse technique creates for the sorcerer in question. By revealing your hand, you get a power-up. And Sukuna's all about having fun and fighting strong enemies. So why would he want to boost in his strength and cut any battle short? Back to the Divine Flame. The prerequisite is first using Dismantle and Cleave, which only gives more validity to the comparisons of Sukuna cooking in a kitchen. With that in mind, maybe the skull imagery and references to death are about the ingredients that are needed to be killed before they can be used in the recipe. But I digress. On its own, Divine Flame rivals even the best flame techniques. Jogo, for example, who basically creates and is a volcano, was outdone in terms of heat produced. He left the special grade cursed a burning pile of remnants when he was done. But this could be due to the limitations and any binding vows that Sukuna may or may not have imposed beforehand automatically. Even so, a monstrous foe like Maharaga, with unlimited capabilities when it comes to adapting, wasn't able to withstand the attack from Divine Flame that came right after Malevolent Shrine. This was in part because Maharaga is not a living threat, so it won't dodge any techniques sent its way. It doesn't seem to care what happens to it. This worked in Sukuna's favor, seeing as Divine Flame is not a fast-moving attack, needing more time to launch and strike an opponent. Taking that into consideration, Sukuna added a Binding Vow to only hit multiple targets when inside his domain. That caused not only catastrophic amounts of fiery explosions, but effects that spread across a much bigger range than Divine Flame could normally. This is also considered Sukuna's ultimate attack. At its base, Sukuna's technique is just called Shrine, or is it Kitchen? Without Yuji's special body as a vessel, we may never have found that out, seeing as it was engraved on him through Sukuna, allowing us to know its name and characteristics. Basically, all that Shrine provides is a lot of slashing, and once Sukuna hits the quota for cutting and chopping people up, then he can open the fire and use that next. By the way, the Japanese term for shrine in this case is mizushi, with zushi being a reference to the small Buddhist shrine to store important objects like statues. There were still a few things that Sukuna's innate shrine was missing, so he acquired them through Megumi's body, or rather his 10 Shadows technique. We won't go through the usual summons since that's more of a Megumi thing, but for the usual ones like Divine Dog or Nu, Sukuna limits their independence in exchange for increasing the range that they can attack, and losing some power. To compensate, Sukuna uses his large well of cursed energy to strengthen them. And with Sukuna being who he is, his versions of the Shikigami are all larger and stronger than Megumi's were. And even though we've seen Megumi merge a few animals, Sukuna takes it a step further, like he usually does. He combines Nu, Great Serpent, Round Deer, and Tiger Funeral to create a monstrous creature called Agito. It's as big as Maharaga and can use the same skills that the separate Shikigami have, like Reverse Curse Technique and Electricity. But the biggest perk is his access to Maharaga, the strongest Shikigami among the 10 Shadows, one that had never before been successfully tamed. With it, Sukuna can take advantage of its resilience and unmatched skills at adapting to any and all phenomena. Likewise, Sukuna can choose whether to have the floating 8-handled wheel, which controls that ability, over himself, the Shikigami, or someone else entirely. Like having Megumi bear the pain and effects of any attack Gojo launches instead of taking it on himself. With the eventual loss of Maharaga to Gojo's Hollow Purple, and observing how the Shikigami could overcome even the strongest of techniques, Sukuna was able to get past infinity by cutting space itself. As far as we know, Maharaga and his wheel for adapting have disappeared altogether, but still, with that ultimate slash in his arsenal, not only did Sukuna kill the strongest modern sorcerer, but he gained the ability to practically slice through anything. It's considered a world-cutting slash, but could it possibly slash time too? If not for Maharaga being able to nullify infinity through changing its cursed energy itself, Sukuna might not have been able to consider modifying his dismantle to slice through space either. Either way, Sukuna's only able to use this special enhanced slash if he uses hand signs, chants, or both. That at least gives the opponent a means to prevent or counter something so deadly. The best option is to stop it before Sukuna can use it, by cutting his mouth and removing his arms, but that's easier said than done. And the only one who was able to dodge it after Sukuna had already said the chant is Maki, due to her heavenly restricted body. But with that being said, this may not be the end of Sukuna using Shrine in new and sadistic ways. And that's pretty much it for Sukuna's curse technique. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like, and if you want to see more Jujutsu Kaisen content like this, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.